And because I can make up a theory and test it if I've got the database and the variables there, and I'm endlessly fascinated. Well, what about this? What about this? What about this? And I can tell you that 99% of the time, the computer shoots me down and says, David, you're full of shit. What this model that you're giving me can't be valid. Sorry, guy, try something else. And that's the thing I love about it, because if you can keep your ego out of it, it's fun to get shot down by structural equation modeling software, because it is disciplined. It's not going to be influenced by politics. And if your ideas don't fit the data, then it's going to slap it right in your face. And you can try it 100 times, it'll slap you 100 times. But when you finally figure out what's going on, it'll say, hey, you got something that's making me sing. And as a computer, it makes me very happy. This model is mind blowing.
Hello, and welcome to the Feeling Good podcast, where you can learn powerful techniques to change the way you feel. I am your host, Dr. Rhonda Borowski, and joining me here in the Murrieta studio is Dr. David Burns. Dr. Burns is a pioneer in the development of cognitive behavioral therapy and the creator of the new teen therapy. He is the author of Feeling Good, which has sold over 5 million copies in the United States and has been translated into over 30 languages. His latest book, Feeling Great, contains powerful new techniques that make rapid recovery possible for many people struggling with depression and anxiety. Dr. Burns is currently an emeritus adjunct professor of clinical psychiatry at Stanford University School of Medicine.
Rhonda?
Hello, David, and welcome to all of our listeners around the country, the universe, and the galaxy. This is the Feeling Good podcast, and this is episode 430, the first podcast of 2025.
And I understand you recently got your first listener email from aliens, because now we have listeners across the universe.
Right. We got our first endorsement from someone on Mars, which maybe I'll read that. And that's the voice of Jeremy Carmel. Jeremy's one of our guests today. He's the CEO of the app and a partner with the Feeling Great app, with David's partner. And we're really happy to have you on, Jeremy, on our first podcast of 2025. And we also have Diane Spangler. Diane Spangler, she's going to introduce herself. She's an incredible researcher. She was a professor for 15 years at Brigham Young University, and now she's started her own treatment clinic where she also conducts research. And she and David and Jeremy have done some recent incredible research that they're going to be talking about. That's the focus today. So hi, David.
Hello, wonderful Rhonda, and thank you for all of last year, and welcome all of you to the new year. We so much appreciate all of you, your comments, your questions, and your hanging in there with us. And today we've got really a fantastic podcast with dramatic and exciting new discoveries with our data from our Feeling Good app of 2 years ago, and now our Feeling Great app. And two fantastic people, my beloved Jeremy, who is a pain in the ass only a tenth of the time, and is a fantastic friend and incredible genius 90% of the time. And that eclipses me, because I'm a pain in the ass about 60% of the time. And also, one of my favorite people in the world is Diane Spangler, who was my first, I've just learned, first supervised postdoctoral fellow at Stanford years ago. And we just had a hell of a good time. You, Diane, would come over to my home for supervision. We'd sit in front of the computer for like 2, 3, 4 hours. We would make limeade up in the kitchen with fresh limes, and then we would come down and analyze data and talk cases, and it was some of the best fun of my life. And I was proud of you when you moved to Utah to BYU, and proud of you, but always sad to have lost that connection, because you were one of the most wonderful people I've ever had the chance to collaborate with, just on so many levels. And now we've begun to work together again, which to me is like a miracle. And you're coming to the Tuesday training group and helping with the teaching there. And now we're beginning to collaborate on research. We're going to start publishing some kick-ass papers once again. And it's just a really exciting time for me.
Me as well. Those years at Stanford were magical. I think I learned more from you than from any other mentor that I've ever had. And I'm glad to be headed sort of back in that direction of us working together again and research and clinically. So it's just a true gift.
Yeah, absolutely. Life seems like a gift. Thank you for the three of you and the fantastic gifts that you've given me. And I'm just glad I'm still alive, 82 and still alive and still kicking and still learning and still working 60 hours a week with great excitement and only the occasional senility. So I'm still functioning on like 7 of the 8 cylinders, but they're pumping out a lot of energy.
So just for the listener, what's the quick summary of the kick-ass stuff that we have prepared for them today?
Well, I'll let Diane say it.
Oh, David, you are more familiar with the data collection on this study,
well,
so you dive in.
Okay, there's 2 or 3. This is an update on the research on the Feeling Good app. And the goal of the Feeling Good, or what we're now calling the Feeling Great app, is to develop a scalable kind of simulation of what I do and what I'm teaching Diane and others to do in therapy to bring about fast changes to negative feelings like depression, anxiety, anger, and so forth, because we have something in Team CBT that really works, but it's very difficult for human therapists to learn because it's paradoxical, it's subtle, it goes against human nature. And the cool thing about the AI that we're using now is that it does what we tell it to do. And we can create a product that can touch you, all of you users. And so part of it is some new data on the effectiveness of the app. But even more exciting, there's been an intense argument for the past 2,000 years about what causes depression, what causes negative feelings. And people have all of these theories that it's caused by a chemical imbalance in the brain, which is bullshit. But research I published in 1975 more or less proved that it was bullshit. It's not due to a deficiency of serotonin in the brain. And people have all of these theories that they've come up with, and most of them are half-baked and not substantiated with research. But one of the most intense forms of research is, Epictetus's statement 2,000 years ago that negative thoughts cause depression, anxiety, and anger. He didn't put it in those words. He put it in his Stoic philosophy language that humans are not disturbed by things, but by the views we take of them, by our thoughts, by the way we think about things. And to this day, people either see that and believe it and understand it, or they are very much opposed to it and argue that it can't be true. It's not true. Thoughts do not cause emotions. Emotions cause thoughts. And the emotion-focused therapy people emphasize that. And people have all kinds of ideas about the causes of negative emotions. But what we're here to announce is we believe we have finally solved this puzzle of 2,000 years. And the reason that it's been so slow to find the answer is it requires extremely sophisticated research techniques. And we won't go into those details of how it's done because it would just be a lot of big words like non-recursive structural equation modeling that I promise I will not mention that word again. But that's the method that we used. And we had 2 huge databases, one from our beta test of 2 years ago of 290 beta testers with what we call then the Feeling Good app, and that a new database with 1,800 commercial users of what we are now calling the Feeling Great app that uses AI that we didn't have two years ago. But in both databases, we've measured changes in belief in negative thoughts over time and with, very accurately, and also changes in negative feelings measured with an incredibly accurate scale with a reliability of 0.96, which is extraordinarily high, not only for clinical work, but even for research. And we had the same scales and the same measures in these two independent groups. And we're able for the first time to measure the exact causal effect out to the decimal points of how strong is the causal effect. Is there any of negative thoughts on negative feelings? And how strong is there a reciprocal causal effect of negative feelings on negative thoughts? Like who is right? Or is there some kind of what's called the third variable effect, the unobserved third variable that can it's just a statistical complication that I won't go into, but it makes it hard to understand these potentially circular causal loops. And interesting, the data came out exactly the same in both groups. So we have, a huge N. I think the combined N must be up around 1,900 people with exactly the same result. And the bottom line is that the results have documented for the first time in 2,000 years that there is, in fact, a massive causal effect of negative thoughts on negative feelings. And it's the belief in negative thoughts that triggers the negative feelings, just as cognitive therapists have been saying for many years now. And that accounts for a large amount of the variance in changes in negative feelings. The N was so big, we were also able to document a causal effect in the opposite direction of negative feelings on negative thoughts. But it's a tiny effect that accounts for less than 1% of the variance or variability in negative feelings. And so the bottom line of that's the first announcement we have of several is that it appears to be true, and we're going to be submitting this to a top journal. We don't know which one yet, but we're going to aim for a really high-level journal to say that it is a fact now. Or it's proven. We feel our data has proven it, that there is, and we've replicated it in two huge independent populations, that yes, it's your belief in negative thoughts that makes you feel the way you do. When you tell yourself, I'm a loser, I'm no good, I'm a hopeless case, things will never change for me, I'm defective, there's something wrong with me, I shouldn't be screwed up, other people are better than I am, and all of this kind of stuff. That it's the belief in those kinds of thoughts that causes depression, and as well as anxiety, as well as inadequacy, as well as hopelessness and loneliness and anger and the whole shebang. And while when you're upset, it does have a slight effect of activating more of the negative neurons in your brain that trigger these negative thoughts. But the massive power of the causal relationship is from thoughts to feelings. And that's good news, because with the app and with Team CBT, we've developed many powerful techniques to help you change the way you think and change the way you feel. So David will now shut up after having made his proclamation.
And can I jump in and just say why I find this so exciting and why our listeners might find it so exciting?
Yep.
Well, one way I like to think about it is, I recently got a new car, and imagine if all the different car companies in the world all had different theories of what causes acceleration. Like they didn't agree that it was force, So back 500 years ago, they probably didn't know what caused acceleration, and so you probably had like kind of backwards medieval theories, like, oh, if we kind of take frog tongues and boil them in a specific way, then that'll cause force, But if everyone's got different, every school of therapy has different theories of causality. Some like the the Freudians talk about childhood trauma and the interpersonal family systems therapy, which I sometimes find very difficult to follow. But the basic idea is that, there's these relationships and the different parts of yourself are what cause depression and anxiety. And I think that everyone's just, because there's no one understanding of how do you actually change negative feelings. Everyone's kind of doing different goofy stuff without without like actually a way to make sure that these things are actually causing a big effect. True, and causing a big effect. And I think that, once you understand some of these basic principles, like negative thoughts cause negative feelings, that's what would allow like a high speed, rapid, powerful ways to change the way you think and feel to exist. Because if you don't have that, if you don't understand why negative feelings occur, you're just kind of shooting in the dark, and
making up bullshit.
And making up BS, and what allows like us to have, I just got I got my first really awesome car. I got a Tesla, and all the engineering that lets that car accelerate from 0 to 60 miles in 4 seconds, it's based on an understanding of how do you accelerate and physical laws that are incredibly important to make these things work. And I think us having an understanding of what actually causes negative feelings, that's what enables high speed change for the first time. And I do think it's gonna revolutionize the field, because people will stop having all these different goofy theories of causality, and we'll all come to understand here's what causes negative feelings. And then it's a game of, well, how do you do that? How do you change negative thoughts as quickly as possible and as effectively as possible and as permanently as possible? So I just think it's super duper exciting from my perspective.
I love what you just said. Now it's Diane's turn.
I love it too, Jeremy, and the question of, where do these feelings come from? It might seem obvious, with Epictetus 2,000 years ago pining about it, but and modern cognitive therapy starting, cognitive theory and therapy starting, 75 years ago, maybe, the sort of beginnings of that cognitive theories of emotion. But really, we haven't known, where do emotions come from? Why do we have them? Where do they come from? And so to be able to really elucidate what has a causal impact, or emotions, essentially, from our data, you might hypothesize or that emotions are actually an outgrowth of cognition.
Yeah, that's right.
A consequence of, and that's an exciting finding.
Yeah, I don't think that people are on the same page in general. Like when I talk to people, and someone says, "Oh, I've been feeling down," everyone's got different ideas about why that is. Like I'm hearing there's a new fad of somatic therapy, and a lot of people are saying, "Oh, it's because I have trauma stored in my left shoulder and stuff." So
and I need to tap on my right eyebrow to overcome my panic attacks and all this bullshit that's out there that people fall for. It's exacerbating if you have any ability at critical thinking, and it seems like a lot of people do not. And are willing to gobble up anything that any kind of charismatic lying guru says.
Well, let me just say you're very emphatic, all three of you, about how you've proven that belief in negative thoughts causes you to feel a certain way, depression or anxiety. So, can you, for me and for everyone listening who are not that familiar with the advanced statistics you all do, can you explain how you have so clearly proven this beyond a shadow of a doubt?
Well, I think we have to say, for one thing, that it's impossible to prove causality in all of science and never will be. All you can say is that we have a model that fits the data fantastically, and we can also show that other models do not fit the data, and that's all physics can do, that's all biology can do, that's all astronomy can do. But what we would say is, in two huge databases, is highly consistent with the idea that changes in negative thoughts have massive immediate causal effects on changes in negative feelings, and that model the computer says, when you put this model and test it against this data, millions of data points from nearly 2,000 people, it fits like a hand in a glove. It's just a perfect fit. It can predict everything. When we put in the model that negative feelings cause negative thoughts, it says it cannot fit the data. When we eliminate that causal effect from thoughts to feelings, the computer says the model has just imploded and been blown to smithereens. This model, where feelings cause thoughts, will not explain the data. And also the third variable effect, the computer is saying, I cannot detect the presence of any third variable that's causing both thoughts and feelings. And so that's what you hope for in science, is that you can find a model finally that absolutely predicts massive amounts of data with just one or two variables. It has fantastic explanatory power, and that also you can test competing models and show that they're a massive and definitive misfit to the data.
And finding models with that kind of fit is rare.
Yeah, the models, in fact, the technique we use is called structural equation modeling, and it's the most conservative form of statistics. And it's almost impossible to fit models to data. And I even was looking, Diane, recently on some internet people looking at structural equation models, and they can't fit their models to the data, and they don't even try, it seems like, anymore. They have these gross misfitting models, and they try to explain something with it. And you've all heard of the 0.05 level of certainty. And in normal statistics, if you want to test a parameter, and if it's significant at the 0.05 level or below, or 0.01 or 0.001 is really, really great, those are really great results. And the causal effect of negative thoughts and negative feelings is statistically significant at like the 30 zeros and a 1. It's not close. It's not even close. But in addition, the computer tests your model, and here it's looking for a p greater than 0.05, which is almost impossible, because if it goes above, it says the p-value for this model is 0.2 or something like that. That's almost too good to be true. That's almost like there's no inconsistency whatsoever between your model and your data. And the model, this one has a p-value over 0.8, which is practically like cheating, but I know that it's not cheating because I'm the one who created the model. And the computer is pretty used to putting me down and telling me that my theories are bullshit. It loves to do that, and I love it when it does that, because then it points me in another direction. But this time it said, David, your models are absolutely correct.
Yeah, two other things that I think they don't establish the direction of causality in the same awesome way the structural equation models do. But some other like simple data that I think is kind of easy to wrap your head around is we've done these charts, and maybe we can include them in the show notes, showing just the correlation between belief in negative thought and change in negative feeling. And it just looks like a linear chart, like the more you reduce your belief in the negative thought, the better you feel. And then also we did a very simple analysis of which in our AI tool, which has empathy and agenda setting and challenging negative thoughts, we just looked at how did people's mood change throughout the experience, because we measure mood at every step, like how upset are you at the at the beginning, how upset are you after empathy, and a lot of people come to us and say, oh, we think the empathy in the AI is awesome. And I agree with them, but the empathy only improves the negative feelings like 10%. Like it's this tiny improvement. And it's the rest of the tool that has, and working on the way you're thinking and your negative thoughts, and that stuff drives another, 50% improvement throughout the process. And so that's like these are just some other these don't establish the direction of causality like David's awesome SEM models, but they're sort of simple ways to see this negative thought belief seems to be incredibly important in changing feelings.
And then the other announcement that we had is that there's this thing called effect size, where people measure their apps or psychotherapy with this thing called the effect size, which is the percent reduction in a negative scale like a PHQ or the Beck Depression Inventory or our own 7-item negative feelings super accurate scale. And then you divide it by the standard deviation of the population. And I promise I'll make this short, Rhonda, but it seems like total bullshit to us, because the standard dividing by the standard deviation of your population, that's just the spread of the data. So the effect size is affected by how great the range is in your data, and I can't. Jeremy and I can't see any sense in that, but we gave in yesterday. We've been resisting using that stupid effect size, and we don't understand why the rest of the world can't see how worthless that is. But we thought, well, let's measure the effect size in our data with the scales that we've created, plus these crappy popular scales like the PHQ-8 or PHQ-9, however you want to look at it, or the GAD, and so forth. So tell the people what we discovered yesterday, Jeremy.
Well, I'll do one better. I'm going to pull up for our video viewers the spreadsheet where we looked at all this, and then we can go. We'll read it out loud. But yeah, so we've looked at it in a couple of ways, but I'll start with some of the ways that I think is most interesting. We took all the people with moderate to severe anxiety based on the GAD-7, which is the Generalized Anxiety Disorder test. It's a 7-item test where I think each question you can get from 0 to 3, and so and then in the score interpretation key they say anything above a 10 or above is moderate anxiety, and then at some level above that it becomes severe anxiety. And so we looked at that group in our data from the Feeling Good app test 2 years ago, before we had renamed the app to the Feeling Great app and made a bunch of other changes. And the mean at the start of the application, when they actually picked up the app, was 13.74. And then they ended that with they ended the app and the beta experience with a score of 6.04. And the starting standard deviation for this group of 101 people was 2.938. And so the change from 13.74 to 6.04 was a change of 7.7. And just to give you a sense of the percentage change, that's a change of 56%. So people got their anxiety scores went down by 56% using this GAD-7 measure, which is probably the most popular measure of anxiety. My wife works at the VA, and that's what they use there. And so that's a 7.7 change on the scale, and with an effect size of the effect size. So that just means you divide by the standard deviation. That's an effect size of 2.62. My understanding is that anything with an effect size of more than 0.8 is considered a giant effect size. So this would be an effect size more than 3 times what would be considered a really big effect. We did the same calculation using the PHQ-9, and the change there was people went from a 9.72 to a 4.93. The change, that's a change of 4.79 points on the PHQ-9, which is a 9-item scale that where each item can be worth up to 3 points for a total of 27 possible points. And there we took everyone who's got a score of 10 or more, and our effect size here was almost 1. So it just shows you that we're seeing these really, really massive changes in effect size. We also, oh, go ahead, David, jump in.
I was just going to say, now you also read a review of many, many apps, and what was the mean effect size that they had?
Yeah, let me pull that up actually for our viewers. So there's a paper here, and the title of the paper is Efficacy of Standalone Mental Health Applications for Anxiety and Depression, a meta-analysis of randomized controlled trials. So this is a group of folks from great schools like Johns Hopkins that looked at all the studies on self-help mental health apps. And they, in the results section, they report that the effect size for the apps they looked at for anxiety, the effect size that they saw was 0.31. So if you compare that to our anxiety measure, we actually saw we saw a 2.6 change in anxiety. So 2.6 over 0.31. Our effect size was 8 times the effect size that they saw in their meta-analysis. And then for depression, the effect size that they saw for depression when they evaluated these different self-help apps, the effect size they saw there was 0.35, and ours was almost 1, 0.996. And so that's an effect size of ours was almost 3 times as large there. So pretty massive difference, and I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah, and another thing, then I'll shut up again, but I'm just so excited by these findings, was that if you look at the speed of an automobile, it's miles per hour. But they're just looking there at miles. They're not taking time into account. And those apps can be effect sizes for over a month, or if you're in therapy, it can be 6 months to see these kinds of changes that barely outdo placebo. Well, in our study of 2 years ago, we got these changes within the first 3 days. And now that we have AI, we're getting these kinds of changes with most people within the first hour of using the app. So it's not only that it's a massively larger effect on depression and anxiety and other negative feelings, but it also happens very, very quickly. So you might say the horsepower would be like 50 times stronger than most other approaches. Time for David to shut up again.
No, that was really interesting, Jeremy. I'm really glad you walked us through that. And it would be fun to put the chart and like visuals in the show notes, and really want to encourage everyone to go to the show notes because it's so much easier to understand when you can connect the visual to your explanation.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
one thing we've been frustrated with is we've been working like our fingers to the bone for the past 5 years to create this a powerful app that we believed was possible. We didn't know it would be possible, but we've believed in it, and now we've created it, and we want people to understand what it is that we've got and how unique and special it is. And because I think, like, if my daughter was struggling with depression, and most of us have kids growing up that've been through some hard times and feeling down, and somebody said, well, gosh, we've got a new tool that we could help your daughter get over her depression. It's not a guarantee, you can't guarantee things, but our data shows that she might be able to overcome that in less than an hour. I would kiss that person's feet and say, please, where is this app? Where can I get this kind of help? And that's what we're trying to spread. The app is cheap, and if you can't afford it, we just contact us. We'll give it to you for free. We want people to be excited by what we've developed. Does it work for everyone? No, nothing works for everyone, and never will. But we consider what we have is like a very major breakthrough in the delivery of mental health to people who are suffering.
Yeah, it's an amazing tool, the app. And in talking about effect size, just want to draw a distinction between effect size is looking at outcomes. So the app works in terms of reducing feelings of depression and anxiety and anger. But this study also looked at what is causing that change, measuring how the app creates that. So when I think about research on treatments or interventions, there's this distinction between outcome research, which looks at does it has an effect on things like depression, anxiety, anger, and that's one branch of a way to evaluate a treatment and important to establish it actually has an effect. But then the next step is to look at how is it creating that effect and what is the mechanism of action or mechanisms of action. And this study that's been done does both of those things. It establishes the outcome of the app, that the app really does work to reduce these painful feelings, but it also establishes how that happens. And that also makes it different from a lot of different forms of intervention for depression and anxiety. For example, the listeners might be thinking, well, there's other things that seem to sort of work to reduce depression, like medications or something. And so some of the outcome data is there, but the mechanism of action studies haven't been done. So, for example, when one has done, some people in the field have done mechanism of action study on SSRIs or antidepressants, and it looks like the way they work is primarily due to placebo effects. That is because people believe and they actually don't work for a lot of people. They really don't reduce feelings of depression in a reliable, significant way. So some of the outcome data isn't actually really supportive of antidepressant medication. But then for those where they find an effect size that, yes, this did decrease depression, it's not through the mechanisms which they think it is. It's actually due to people believing that this pill is going to help me, and that accounts for the majority of the outcome. So again,
That's a really interesting and awesome point. Like if we ideally, you could do an antidepressant study where you would actually measure the belief in the negative thoughts. And so you could see that the change for both the placebo and the active group had you would see these changes in negative thoughts that actually were the cause of the change in the negative feelings. If we did that research.
And people just have bullshit thinking. They'll say something like, "Well, I meditate and I feel better, so that proves that you don't have to change negative thoughts." But that's no proof of anything except that whoever's saying is full of horseshit and isn't very bright. And I won't say that on. Oh, Rhonda said I'm not supposed to swear on the show, so I didn't say that. But at any rate, and some people might think that's what it shows. And so we recently with Jason Mino did a test of changes in negative thoughts during meditation, negative thoughts and feelings, and sure enough, we saw the same thing as with the app. If you're feeling better with meditation, there is a change in your belief in your negative thoughts. That is the mechanism of change of negative emotions, I believe, through any intervention. And if you want to test things, you're going to test things, the efficacy of your app or your pills or whatever, you're going to have to start measuring the effect on belief in negative thoughts, because that's where the action is. And I feel that the contribution of our app, and this is thanks a lot to Jeremy and your fascination with and natural aptitude with and tolerance for very fine-grained statistical analyses. It's the basic research that's showing us why and how people change, and that's, as you're saying, pointing out so importantly, Diane, that's key to me. That's always been as important as the fact that the app is effective, that it's giving us the secrets for the first time of how people really change. And I think the basic research that we're doing with the app is more reliable than basic research with humans, because when you have human therapists, you never know what they're doing behind closed doors. They think they're doing one thing, but it's people will say all kinds of things. They say, "Oh, I'm a cognitive therapist because I occasionally use the word thought." in my therapy, but the person doesn't know a damn thing about how to do cognitive therapy, much less team CBT. But anyway, I'm on a rant again, and I do love to rant about these things because I feel, and people don't like it when I say this, so I won't say it. But if I was uninhibited, I would say our field is terribly screwed up. It's filled with gurus who declare they have a new school of therapy. They're all claiming, I've got the answer, my techniques work, and none of them are measuring anything. And people just become like cult followers, and we need science to we need a science-based, data-driven form of psychotherapy with humans delivering it and with apps delivering it, and that's what I'm trying to give birth to, and that's what is actually evolving. And if you weren't, partnering with me on this, Jeremy, none of it would have been possible.
Well, we have
Yeah,
to thank you so
you're
much,
doing.
David. Though we have to thank our whole team, which has been an
Yeah.
awesome team. But thank you, David. It is exciting. Rhonda, sorry, you were going to
I
say
mean, so
something.
you're taking things into a like definitely a more scientific, data-based than lots of, like, you're calling them gurus, but lots of people who say, "Oh, I'm coming at this from my intuition,"
Yeah,
which actually can be very problematic in the long run,
yeah,
from what
yeah,
versus
yeah.
what you're describing.
And I won't say
Well,
this to any of
everything
our.
starts from a theory, though. So in that sense, it starts from a theory or a group of ideas, and so I think that that's useful and where everything begins. But then there needs to be the discipline of actually testing. So you can have the idea that I think this will work, and then you do the outcome study and say, oh, it seems to have some effect. But then you have to certainly replicate the outcome, but then do the mechanism of action research. And most don't do either of those,
Yeah, I
the
love what you're
outcome or the
saying.
mechanism. They have the ideas and they like their ideas, and we all like our ideas, our own ideas, but you have to have the discipline to really test them and let the data tell you, in the way that David was talking about these models. Most of the models that one tries, your theoretic model, and you try and test it with data, don't actually fit the data, and you have to be humble enough to be like, okay, back to the drawing board.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's why I
that's so
love do
important.
that's why I love doing statistical modeling with our data, because we've got large databases now, something I've always dreamed about. I never thought would be possible before computers came along, and the ability to collect really accurate data to create tremendously accurate scales that we have right now. The scales are beginning to rival the measurements that you can do in chemistry and biology and astronomy and things of that nature. And a new science can evolve. But I can sit down with a database and test as many as 50 theories in an hour. And because I can make up a theory and test it if I've got the database and the variables there, and I'm endlessly fascinated. Well, what about this? What about this? What about this? And I can tell you that 99% of the time, the computer shoots me down and says, David, you're full of shit. This model that you're giving me can't be valid. Sorry, guy. Try something else. And that's the thing I love about it, because if you can keep your ego out of it, it's fun to get shot down by structural equation modeling software, because it is disciplined. It's not going to be influenced by politics. And if your ideas don't fit the data, then it's going to slap it right in your face. And you can try it 100 times, it'll slap you 100 times. But when you finally figure out what's going on, it'll say, hey, you got something that's making me sing. And as a
Mhm.
computer, it makes me very happy. This model is mind-blowing. And
And
that's
yeah,
how
again,
science,
makes our data so exciting. Our findings, the fit is, you don't run across that very often. And
yeah,
uh,
yeah. Rhonda is now going to make all of this practical and relevant to our audience.
Well, maybe this is like too anecdotal and doesn't fit, but it's reminding me of, I did have a client who came to me who was referred by a friend of hers who had got great results through Team CBT, and she came in and the first thing she said was, I follow my intuition. I don't want to fill out any of these forms. And I said, yeah, there's lots of million reasons why you don't want to work with me. But here you want to have, and so we talked about that. And she said, no, she wants to. And because of the results of her friend. And I said, well, I don't work from my own intuition. I follow the structure of Team CBT and there's science behind it. And so you know, we did do like a complete 2-hour Team CBT kind of intensive session. And at the end, following the Team CBT model of, you know, identifying the beauty and the positivity of your symptoms and the cognitive distortions and going through all of the testing that you do leads to and led this client to overcoming depression and anxiety. And at the end, she said, I'm so surprised because I usually come only from my intuition and love to talk and chat and we didn't really do that much. We came from data. And she had, on the evaluation of the therapy session, she was like all stars and the best therapy session ever. And she felt better than she had spending $100,000 on other types of therapy. So I don't know. I
I
just
think that's
think,
a great
That's
example because
cool,
like
Rhonda,
people
what you're
yeah, it was
saying.
yeah
great.
people come in like I mean the way I sort of think about it is if you're like a surgeon and you're trying to I don't know say you gotta put someone has such a broken arm you got to put screws in to hold it in place and you wouldn't let them say well I've heard on the street that actually I just need to drink lemon juice and that'll fix the problem. You wouldn't
Hmm.
say oh okay well why don't we just do your
Or
lemon
fish
juice thing
oil.
or fish oil or whatever.
Yeah.
You'd say no, I'm sorry but like I know how to fix a broken arm and I'm going to stick to what I know works based on data and evidence. But and it's so cool that you did stick to your guns and then she kind of then said oh well let's give it a try and got to see an
Hmm.
awesome result. That's a cool
And
story.
I also think that when people are listening to this podcast, they might be feeling somewhat skeptical.
I'm sure
Because,
they are.
and so I would just really want to encourage people that who are feeling skeptical to go to the app and try it themselves and, have their own first person, their own experience to see that what you're talking about is actually true.
Well, just to emphasize exactly what you're saying, because I can relate to that too, and I know that sometimes when I've felt down, I start thinking, "Oh, the team stuff can't work, and there's no point in working on my negative thoughts." So I totally understand that kind of thinking. I actually just did for fun. I went into a text thread with 70 or so people, and I just said, "Hey, I'm in the middle of a podcast right now, and I wanted to understand what do people think causes negative feelings?" And I just did a little poll. And the top vote getters were a chemical imbalance, negative
Mm,
thoughts, a lack of friendships, social media, and then the runners up were a lack of meaning in life, a lack of money, and childhood trauma. And the reason I think it's so interesting and important is, I've actually seen this thing, and I won't name names because it would be unfair, but, I've seen this thing even where sometimes, even team therapists who've studied with David they'll teach people these techniques for working on their negative thoughts, but then they'll also like layer in something else. Like they'll say, oh, it's also good just to notice your thoughts. Just notice that you're telling yourself you're a loser. Just notice that, and you can do that if you don't feel like working on your negative thoughts, or oh, just meditate, or they kind of incorporating some other dimension, and there's nothing inherently wrong with bringing in multiple ideas, but I think the thing that can be so destructive about that is you can actually point people in the wrong direction so that when they get a relapse, because everyone's going to,
hmm.
once they get an improvement, they're going to start feeling crappy again. They're likely to do something that's not going to work, or they're going to tell themselves, oh, this time the thoughts are real and there's no point in challenging them. And, I just think I think if it is true that negative thoughts cause negative feelings and it looks that way so strongly from our data, it's such a mistake to point to try to throw in these other ideas because they're going to distract people from doing what works, and they're likely to,
Yeah.
when they get a relapse, they're going to say oh yeah it's pointless to work on my negative thoughts, and then they're going to go and try to release the trauma in their shoulder and they're going to be stuck again, and
Mhm.
You have to
so
tap on the
So
eyebrow though
would
if you
you
have a relapse. That'll take care of it.
so would you take from our data that that emotions only arise from negative thoughts?
Let's say that again.
Would you take from our results that negative feelings only arise from negative thoughts? Or
No,
can they arise in other ways too?
we need further research to look at that. I mean, there's many other variables that are not in our model that have powerful causal effects on negative thoughts and feelings. And so but the question is, are there other variables that affect negative feelings without affecting negative thoughts, the belief in negative thoughts? And I think that's
Yeah.
unlikely, but we're, so far accounting for maybe 50% of the variance in negative feelings. So there is room for other causes that aren't yet in the model. So you don't want to overinterpret your data. It is my own personal belief that it's impossible to change negative feelings without a change in negative thoughts that are
yeah.
associated with
So you
those
would say
feelings.
that those feelings arise from thoughts. So
Yes, uh-huh.
emotions
But
are always an
that's
outgrowth of cognition.
pardon me.
So that feelings are always an outgrowth of cognition.
That would be my point of view, but we have not proven that or even attempted to test that in this particular study. We've just shown that cognitions are a powerful driver of negative feelings, and that there's
Yeah.
little or
Yeah.
no causal effect in the opposite, little causal effect in the opposite direction.
Can I chime in on this? Because I want to make sure we don't give our viewers a misimpression that, oh, David or Jeremy or this group of people think that, well, because thoughts are the only thing, because negative thoughts cause negative feelings, we think that if you get fired or lose $1 million or, have a terrible accident and break your arm, that doesn't, that you're not going to feel down after that. I think what we're saying is something more specific, which is, definitely if you have a negative event, a lot of people after they experience a negative event are going to feel down. But what we're saying is the reason they feel down is not directly because of the negative event. It's because of the way the negative event changes their thinking. And I'll just give an example really quick. When I was at Burning Man a couple of years ago, I had a little volunteer job of helping people climb onto this giant web that was of a mesh that was suspended about 40 feet from the ground. And most of the people who kind of climbed up, and my job was to kind of get people, oh, sit over, there's a free spot over there, go sit there, and go check that part out, and kind of keep the weight relatively evenly distributed. And so what I saw is that probably 29 out of 30 people would kind of climb up and sit down and have fun, and there was like a cool light show and just enjoy the experience. 1 out of 30 people would get up there and be shaking and be terribly frightened. And so they were all experiencing the same thing of going into this suspended net above the ground. But what I'm really sure of is that person, they were having very different emotional reactions. Like some people were thinking, oh, this is so cool with being above the air and with these lights. Some people were saying, oh my God, this is really scary. I'm going to die. The net's going to give out. I'm going to fall. They were all experiencing the same thing, but they were having different emotional reactions to it. And when you talk to them, you could see they were scared they were going to fall and hurt themselves. That was the difference. It was their thinking was different. And so it's not that, yes, people with a fear of heights, when they go to the top of a tall building, unless they do it, enough to get full exposure therapy, they're going to experience a, negative feeling. And so we're not saying that negative events can't play into that at all. We're just saying that the way they play into it is by influencing your thoughts. You're having these scary thoughts that are frightening you.
Yeah, that thoughts
Love that
is
example.
always the mediating variable.
That's the theory. And to, as David's point, we've got powerful evidence that negative thoughts have a powerful effect on negative feelings. I think what David's also saying is we haven't proven it's the exclusive way to influence negative feelings, but that's your strong, is it fair to say, David, that's your strong intuition and belief is
Yeah,
that it
yeah.
that it's required to have a negative feeling, it's required to have a negative thought.
Yeah, and there's even in the Feeling Good podcast. I don't know if anyone is familiar with that, but you might have heard of it. And we have published live sessions, and I'm thinking of the live therapy session with our beloved Marilyn Coffey, who came to me the day after she was diagnosed unexpectedly with terminal cancer, lung cancer, and she was angry and shattered totally because she'd never smoked. It came as a complete surprise. And she had 100 on all 9 categories of negative feelings. And I worked with her with Matt May live on a podcast. And it was not the cancer that was causing her negative feelings. It was her distorted negative thoughts, just like what anyone else would have. And she was saying, I'm a failure because I've spent a lot of my life being an alcoholic, and I'm a failure because I never found a loving partner during my life, and I'm a failure because I'm beginning to doubt the existence of God, and I'm beginning to doubt the existence of the afterlife. And she was just beating the hell out of herself in a really mean and distorted way. And when we helped her change the way she was feeling, by the end of the podcast, she was laughing, she was joyous, her depression had disappeared, her shame had disappeared. She was still sad that she had a limited life expectancy, which is normal. And we're not supposed to be happy all the time, and sometimes negative feelings without distorted thoughts can be a very high, even spiritual experience. But
So
yeah,
I
go ahead.
wonder too if our findings change a bit the way to view emotions as not something separate from the thoughts, but an indicator of how important and how much one believes in the thought. So that emotion
Yeah.
is actually that, rather than what we've been calling emotion. It's just an indicator.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say just. It is an indicator of how important the thought is, or how valued the thought is,
Yeah.
or how relevant the thought is, and how much it's believed. That's what
Yeah.
emotion is.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
What would you, any thoughts about that?
I just think it's awesome what you're saying, so I'll shut up having said that, but it's cool. I think Beck might have liked that idea very much too.
So emotion is just a part of meaning making, but it's how relevant, important, and how much you believe whatever the preceding thought is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, I can have the thought, this is a gray wall, and I don't really care. There's no emotion there.
Yeah. And the very moment, it's an optimistic thing, because the very moment you stop believing that thought, in that very moment, your emotions were changed. And that's a
Yeah.
huge shift for the field, which I was trained to believe, and the residents at Stanford and everywhere were trained to believe that depression builds up for years and can only be chipped away at slowly over a period of treatment lasting years. And when I was a resident, that's how we treated people. And it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. They just came and talked, and we chatted and gave them antidepressants, and I almost never saw changes happening. But now that we have a model, we know what causes change, we can see really rapid change, and that's a great optimism.
If emotion is believability and importance of the thought, then the minute you change the believability, you have immediate effects, which is what was observed in the data.
Yeah. That's right.
It's not some disease that grows over time or something.
So you're going even further, Diane, saying
yes, they're
not just causally linked, but they are different manifestations of the same thing.
Yes, that's what I wonder. That's what I wonder if our results would lead to that interpretation.
Yeah, well,
It's
that's why I
really
like
cool.
working with you because you come up with all this
Yeah.
awesome, as the Buddha said, awesome shit.
Yeah, and
And it's really cool.
I probably am just going to sound like a hype man now, but I really think that this importance of measuring how people feel, and David, this is something you've just been saying for decades now, but looking at like how does someone feel in this exact moment? You know, how do you
Yeah.
feel right now? How anxious are you right now? How frustrated are you right now? How angry are you right now? I think that's so important because um, these it's the only thing that allows us to see, oh wow, you can actually your feelings can change in a flash, in a moment when you change your negative thoughts. And I just think that these, you know, I think there is a room for, oh, how have you been doing over the last week or the last month or the last year? But I think that like understanding, you know, what's the reality moment by moment is such a powerful research
Yeah,
tool to
it's
be
kind
able
of
to
a
unearth
here and
things.
now type of treatment, really. It's like
Yeah,
we're going to
totally.
change you today, right? How you're feeling right here in this session, or right now when you're working with
Yeah.
the app. And when I was a psychiatric resident, change was always some pie in the sky thing that we thought was going to happen in 6 months or 2 years or something like that. It was all very vague and mysterious. And if you keep bullshitting with your therapist long enough and take these pills, eventually you're going to find joy. And I never saw that happen.
Yeah. Now, just to like, and this may not be the right direction for the conversation, but I think it might be worth talking about. Like, I feel like people think it's kind of harmless. Like, oh, what's the big deal if everyone kind of has a different theory of why people are upset? Like, what's the big deal if some people believe it's childhood drama? What's the big deal if some people believe it's a chemical imbalance? I'd love to just hear people's thoughts about that. One thing I saw was there's a very interesting researcher who posted, and I'd have to find the reference for it, but they basically posted a study that showed that people who believed in the chemical imbalance theory of depression actually had, if they had been unsuccessfully treated with antidepressants, they basically were very unlikely to improve after that because if you believe that the only way I can get better is through a change in my chemistry, then you know you can't, and then you try that and it doesn't work, you kind of think you're hopeless. And so that made good sense to me, and I'm wondering, I mean, uh, you know, have you guys seen costs when people have a wrong theory of, is
I
there
can mention two costs. First, we had proof of that in my clinic. I don't know if you're aware of this, Diane, but I published an article with our data from our clinic in Philadelphia. When controlling for initial severity of depression, some got antidepressants plus cognitive therapy, and some got cognitive therapy with no antidepressants. But looking at the two starting out from the same exact depression level, uh, the ones getting cognitive therapy plus antidepressants did not improve as much or as rapidly as those getting cognitive therapy alone. It's consistent with what you're saying. It's not proof of what you're saying, but it's very consistent of that. But I think the biggest price of all is that for a long time astronomy was combined with the Catholic Church, and it was kind of a guru type of thing where the Pope said that the everything revolves around the Earth. The sun does, the stars do, the Earth is the center of the universe. And that was not based on mathematical modeling. It was based on what some presumably spiritual, gigantic, correct Catholic way of thinking was. And when the astronomers got the telescope, that's like our new scale for measuring negative emotions. The telescope was a huge breakthrough that they could suddenly get sharper measurements of the movement of the Earth and the stars. And they said it's not true that the sun revolves around the Earth. What's true is that the Earth revolves around the sun, and the sun is revolving around the galaxy. And we're not the center of the universe. And the Catholic Church, it pissed them off, just like I'm trying to piss people off who are listening to the program today. I hope you will get pissed off and stop believing the bullshit that you believe about all your crappy schools of psychotherapy that aren't worth shit. And you know, again,
Yeah.
I'm
But
just
the
quoting
well,
but the
what the
belief in
Buddha
the
said.
intervention really does matter, and it shows up in our data too, David.
Yeah, yeah.
That how much you believe in the tool
Yeah.
that actually was an
Yeah.
impact in our data as well.
Oh, yeah. We'll have to
And
do another
it's not
program on
the
that.
only thing, but certainly it's the change in negative thinking that really
Right.
impacted emotion, but also how much people believed in the cognitive model also
Yeah.
had an impact.
Yeah.
So
That
when
that's
people
right.
believe in whatever tool you're giving them or whatever idea you're giving them, that can have effects.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And
But
that's a
it sort of
great
proves
topic.
our point even more, that it's the
Yeah.
belief.
Yeah.
It's not the tool, it's the belief
Yeah. We
that
can have a
really
whole
affects
other
people.
Mm.
podcast on that fantastic thing because we have fantastic data on that. But what I
Yep.
want, my final point that I wanted to make is then the astronomy broke away from the Catholic Church, and there was 100 years of persecution and torture, and because people didn't
And is
want
that
to
what we have
go.
coming our way?
We have, yeah,
Probably.
in part, yes, but you look now what's happened to astronomy and the fantastic thing, the understanding of the universe, incredible telescopes, seeing almost back to the origin of the universe, giving us the truth for the first time about the history of the universe, and that's my model for psychotherapy, a science-based, data-driven one that will lead to similar fantastic breakthroughs. When Team CBT is kind of a big breakthrough in and of itself, but I'm looking for a process of breakthroughs so where over time we'll continue to have more and more fantastic high-speed ways of relieving human suffering, not just depression and anxiety, but eventually find out the cause of schizophrenia and bipolar and all kinds of things, and have a psychotherapy of the future, a mental health treatment of the future that rivals, the sciences like physics, astrophysics, and the technology that's bringing, Teslas and all kinds of unbelievable uh, developments and blessings into our lives. That's the price you pay for continuing to belong to your, as the Buddha so often said, your effing cults.
Yeah, no, and I think that's so important to what you're saying because
Yeah.
my understanding is that the head of the NIH, you know, basically said that there have been no really meaningful breakthroughs in the treatment of depression in 40 years.
Yeah,
And it's just like we're totally, the field's kind of been stuck because we don't really understand what's going on. So it's all kind of speculation and witchcraft and I think, if you look at depression levels, you see that we're actually getting worse, not better over the last 10 years. And it just shows the lack of effective treatment, because you wouldn't say, once they got the polio vaccine up and running, they crushed polio, they beat it,
yeah.
and negative feelings will probably always be a feature of human life. But the fact that we have so much untreated depression and so little in the way of effective treatment for people who've struggled and tried things and it hasn't worked is a real tragedy. And hopefully we can do something about it.
Yeah, that's a really great point, Jeremy. And David, that last bit that you just spoke about sort of brought chills to me. It was so exciting. And
Oh, thank you.
yeah,
Am I forgiven for my use of four-letter words?
no, you can't, you have to stop swearing, but that's another story.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, well, this was a really thrilling podcast. And like
Well,
I
if you
said,
like it, Rhonda, we have a lot more basic science discoveries to share in future podcasts. We won't make them
cool.
all like this, though. We'll continue mixing them up, so we'll have different things for different people. But
Hmm.
that we're just so glad to be on the show, and thank you, Rhonda, for allowing us to come and do our thing.
You're so
Yeah,
welcome. I loved all of your examples and the contributions that you made, Jeremy and Diane. It was such a pleasure to have you on the podcast. You made a kind of a complicated situation easy to understand, and I
yeah,
really appreciate that. I believe that one of the reasons, Diane, you and David reconnected is because you're going to be part of the advisory committee for the research arm of the Team CBT International, which is the nonprofit that a group of us are starting to um, continue David's legacy, both as a membership organization, as a research arm, and as a teaching um, an opportunity to provide support for teaching throughout the country, on an international basis. So we're really excited to have you as a part of that. And in 2025, people should look for more announcements about when we're launching fully.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you for that
Yeah.
announcement, Rhonda.
And also,
Thanks.
there'll be a paper coming out, and we can announce that, and then you can get all the gory technical details of the structural equation modeling work David did, and maybe we might also have a even sooner publication, I think, in Psychology Today, and so that could
Great.
be cool stuff for folks who want to learn more.
Yeah, very cool.
All right. Goodbye, everybody.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
Thank you for
Actually-
last year, and have a great 2025.